Good evening, YouTubers. It's me, Johnny. I was watching some stuff today. I don't have much to say today. I've been watching quite a bit of David Paulides 411 Missing. Can-Am, that's his channel if you want to go there. He's also got a couple of documentaries he's did that are right now playing on YouTube, so if you're using a VPN and it looks like you're coming from North America, you'll probably get them for free. The downside of free is you have to watch the ads, or you might be able to see them on Amazon if you're hooked up to Amazon. Anyways, it's a really strange thing going on where people are going missing all over the world, but especially in North America. But I mean United States, Canada, and also too in Australia, but all over the world really. These strange disappearances where they don't really make any sense and no one can really figure out what's going on, and in some cases they can't even find the bodies. Anyways, that's not really the topic tonight. I was watching one of the Matt Smith Doug Casey interviews, and Matt Smith interviews Doug Casey, and he's kind of an interesting character. I like him. I suppose not everyone will, but he seems like an interesting guy. Basically interviewing Doug Casey and, ask some questions about life in general and things of that nature. Apparently, Matt Smith met him in Argentina. He was just walking down the road, and of course he knew who Doug Casey was, but just went up and said hello to him, I guess, and that's how they met, and then kind of from there just went and started a YouTube channel apparently. I presume in the future though, since they're building an email list, they're going to build some kind of business out of this. I'm not really sure what, but anyhow, Doug Casey and Matt Smith have been doing these interviews for the last 3 months, and for like the last week or two they haven't done any interviews. My understanding is Matt Smith said he was sick or something. He didn't say from what, but I presume from the COVID. I've been kind of feeling strange too, but I don't think I've ever... Well, when this COVID first came out, I thought I had it. I can't many tests. I think I'll just say 3 at least. And according to all the tests I've ever gotten, they claim I've never had it. So I don't know what to make of that. Anyways, the latest topic of what Matt and Doug talk about is what to do when the shit hits the fan, or actually where to live. Apparently, from all these interviews, maybe that's the number one question they get is, where should I live if the shit hits the fan? Should I leave the state? Should I stay? Whatever. Well, basically what it comes down to, and Doug was saying, well, it depends how much money you have. Your biggest risk nowadays is probably from your government, which I tend to agree with. So if you have the money, or if you have the income or the skills to earn an income and live wherever you want, and as a generalization I would just say Latin America, but the world's a big place and there's a lot of places you can go. I just noticed, like, even here in Central America, and I can't tell you why this is happening, but like you'll see a lot of Chinese, Koreans, Indians, Pakistanis. Now when I say a lot, I don't mean like a lot compared to like Mexico, but a lot for what I'm used to seeing. These Asians are just coming in and setting up businesses. It's very, very fascinating, very, very interesting. So there's something about Latin America that attracts people from all over the world. I think it's lack of enforcement of regulation, lack of enforcement of taxes, and more of a live and let live kind of attitude. Just like an example where I'm at in Guatemala, you more or less can do whatever you want within reason, as long as you're not doing anything too weird. I've seen some weird shit, which I won't talk about here, but that's very, very infrequently. And I saw some stuff that's kind of messed up in up on the lake Atitlan. I haven't been up there in a while. I was recently in the capital. I'm going to go back there. Incidentally, I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in the capital. That was kind of fascinating to hear what he had to say. Things are definitely changing, and I mean in the whole world, but everywhere. And I was talking to him about immigration, even though I have permanent residency. With all these new rule changes, I don't even know what that means anymore. Anyways, getting away from that for a minute, it was a fascinating topic hearing Matt and Doug talk about where does one go if you do have money, or if you just don't want to stick it out in the U.S. I personally don't have a clear answer. In general, I'd say mainly because of my skills, my level of education, how I view the world, that kind of thing. I'm not saying it's the best place. I'm just going to say as a region, South America is very fascinating, interesting. Now, I've only been to Peru. I didn't care for it. But that was because I was in Lima, about the worst place you can probably live. I was in Valdivieso, which I'm probably not pronouncing right. Which, if there's kind of a YouTube video about, not about Valdivieso specifically, but when immigrants come into Peru, like from Venezuela, and when immigrants from like smaller towns, I say immigrants, but smaller towns from Peru or the mountains, when they come into Lima, they go to places like Valdivieso. It's kind of in this. I want to say, I can't remember who it was in. It was in one documentary. Anyways, they kind of showed parts of Valdivieso. It's kind of a ghetto. So that's another reason I probably didn't care for it. But it's nothing I've never seen, like, say, in Baltimore. In fact, when I think of like Baltimore, the Washington, D.C. area, I tend to think of that as way more ghetto, but that's probably because I grew up there. And because of the language barrier, I'm not always sure what's going on. So, but when I lived in Peru, I didn't have any bad experiences really. My thing is, if I was gonna like bug out and I really thought the world was gonna come to an end, or at least a big change, I think we're going through a big change. Who knows if we're coming to an end? But I'd like to be kind of in the what I always called the jungle, and people kind of get irritated with me. But I'm trying to think of what other people call it. I can't remember. But out in the hinterlands, in the jungle, like where the borders meet, like in that area, it could be Peru, Ecuador, Brazil, or even Venezuela. All these areas kind of, there's border town areas. I would live in one of those areas, in the hinterlands, and probably not in a big city, but who knows? Probably a big city for the area, but not compared to like Lima or like Sao Paulo or places like that. I would live in the kind of the smaller communities. I would probably live in the border areas, mainly because of the economic opportunities of people going back and forth. For those who don't know, South America, there's a lot of inflation in their economy, so things are priced high because of inflation, but there's a lot of like local taxes, like IVA's kind of high. Like where I live, IVA's I think 12%. When I was in Peru, it was 18 or 19%. I think it was 19%. I mean, that's like 1% from 20%. I mean, that's like Europe. Anyways, there's a lot of import taxes, and then on top of that, there's IVA. And then there could be like city taxes, and I don't know if I want to call it municipality taxes, but there's all these like local taxes on top of your IVA, and then importing fees and stuff. So basically, the problem with South America is it's expensive because of all these taxes, because in general, they don't collect a lot of taxes through income tax because so many people cheat. And so what's ended up happening is Paraguay, it used to be kind of a tax haven, it still kind of is. So stuff comes in through Paraguay, then it gets smuggled into, like, say, Brazil, Argentina, of course. Taxes are out of, like, import taxes and indirect taxes are just really, really high, even in Ecuador. So if you doubt what I'm saying, go to, like, Google, like, how much an Apple computer or Apple laptop or an Apple phone costs, like, say, in Brazil, and then say Ecuador, and then say Peru, it oftentimes will be double the price of what it would be in the US, and that's mainly just tax. It's just mainly tax. Not to mention the fact that in Latin America, that Apple product could be a 1 year old in Latin America, whereas, in North America, we get the new products every year. Well, it takes quite a while for them to get to Latin America, and you're not always getting the latest and greatest product from Apple. My only point of mentioning all that is taxes are high because people in general are out working off the books. They're not paying a lot of tax, and that's just how it is. The other reason I would I would consider South America, and of course Central America too, but is if you really want to live off the grid, it's much easier there. You don't really need local ID except for to cross a border or a passport, or you need local ID just to have a bank account. That's about it. If you can figure out how to work bank without banking in your own name, then that problem's solved. But part of the reason I live in the hinterlands is because if you start a brick and mortar business, it's mostly all cash. Now, I'm not saying there's not like cash apps or apps that you can have on your phone to get paid. I'm just saying in general, culturally speaking, people are used to paying cash. But slowly over time, I'd imagine there'll be more and more payment processes that you can do offline or online, but you can do them so the money either lands in a bank account in North America, Central America, South America, Europe, wherever the hell you want your money to land. That's another thing. So if you figure out how to bank, use all these different apps, use stable coins or whatever, you can usually cash out through a nominee, into the local currency cash, and then convert to dollars or euros if you want a harder currency, or convert to Bitcoin, which you don't have to do cash out and get physical cash. You could just do that electronically. But I just mentioned that just that's why I personally would like it. And then too, another reason I prefer Latin America or South America, even though I haven't really lived there extensively, is partly for cultural reasons. Like as I said before, my ancestors are more from Central Europe, and then the other side of the family is more from the United Kingdom. But if you're used to growing stuff and you like to grow stuff, there's the advantage that in Latin America you can grow whatever you want in Central or South America. The soil is good. Well, it can be good. I won't speak to Paraguay because they're growing all that soy out in Brazil and Paraguay, and I don't know what that does to the soil. I imagine it doesn't do good stuff. But to a certain extent, you can still buy land kind of cheap. In general, I would say Latin America isn't always cheap like people think, but it can be. It just depends on where you're going, your negotiating skills, and just certain market conditions. But that's, I guess, if the shit hits the fan, and that's my biggest concern, I want to live off grid, I would probably do it somewhere either in Central America or South America. If I really, really thought things were going to go really, really bad, I guess I would rather be in South America. I don't have a rational reason for that because I've only experienced Lima, Peru. But because of my understanding and experience in Central America, I just know if I'm like in the jungle or the Amazon area, I'll just use the Amazon area, but the borders are very fluid there. There's a lot of business opportunity because of the taxes that are high there. So you can get electronics from, say Paraguay. I'm just using this example. Buy your electronics in Paraguay, put them in your car, truck, and then pop them across the border. If you live in a border town or wherever, take them to the local capital if you want, and sell them. You could either sell them to distributors or start up your own little shop. That's the other thing too. In Latin America in general, whether you're in South America or Central America, you can quite literally you can rent a place or buy a place, but you can quite literally rent a place, start a brick and mortar business in part of, say, your house or apartment or whatever. Let's say on the ground floor. On the upper level, you can actually live there. And when you're doing all that, in general, the rents are quite affordable. If you can afford $300 to $500, you can afford a lot of different places. And at least in Guatemala, quite a big place if that's what you want. Maybe in the capital you have to spend more, but in general that's what you're going to pay. And you can quite literally get pretty fast internet, hook it up, work your online gig or job, maybe 10 or 12 hours a week, whatever, and then run your brick and mortars business and have multiple incomes coming in. And then if you want, this is me, culture reasons I mentioned this, you can grow stuff in your backyard. Now, I'm not saying you want to grow stuff in your backyard and compete and sell to locals like tomatoes or anything. I'm just putting it out there for other kind of crash crops that people may think of but may not want to talk about online. You can do all that kind of thing too. And in a place like say Guatemala, no one cares. That's one thing you kind of could fit in where no one really cares. Now, people will want to say, well, why not Asia? I've lived in the Philippines. It's a great place. I like it. I don't have any issues with it. But in most of Asia, even including the Philippines, you, as a foreigner, you really stick out. Not all of Asia, but most Asian countries, you can't legally own property. You have to use a nominee to buy property. Or you can lease. That's another option. You can lease out there. And there's nothing wrong with that. And the cool thing about Asia is it's way more dynamic from an economic point of view. It's way more dynamic than any Latin America I've ever seen. The cities are great. They're vibrant. They have a huge amount of energy and a lot of money to be made. But you just have to understand, if you're a foreigner, you're never really going to be part of the community. You're going to have to make money in kind of discreet ways because Asians will copy your business model and take your rice bowl, so to speak. And it's very, very competitive. Now, if you want to compete out there and make some money and bring it to Latin America, that's one option. But that's the main reason why, like, if I was going to bug out and go to Asia, it would just be to learn some business skills, to do some business, with the idea of ultimately coming to Latin America as I got older, mainly because you really stick out. Now, in general, if you want to like live like a native, go off grid, like in the Philippines or Cambodia, where I guess you could still do that. But from what I've seen of COVID and what I've kind of know how locals are, you never really know as a foreigner when you'll get kicked out of the country or asked to leave or have your assets taken. So as a foreigner, I would just say you're never quite accepted in any country. Maybe you're just tolerated. When I think of that, I'm thinking of places like Thailand and Cambodia. The other thing this concerns me, and I know it concerns some of my friends in Thailand. They're looking at what's China going to do in Thailand. Thailand, Cambodia, and some other countries are becoming more and more aligned. And with that alignment, will they tolerate foreigners living and playing and doing business in those countries? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. My friend, he's kind of monitoring things, and he basically said to me and some other people, he'll give his honest opinion when he thinks it's time to leave. As of right now, he doesn't think that's the case, but he says it's okay to be concerned about what China's going to do because China is a rising power and the United States is kind of a declining power. And I would say the United States and Canada and Australia, New Zealand, and most of Western Europe are more or less bankrupt. We just don't admit it. And how they're going to keep up their influence in the world while they're simultaneously bankrupt and owe millions of dollars, euros to pensioners. I don't know. Matt and Doug were talking about that, how pensioners, we haven't even seen the really bad stuff yet when the pensions are basically go belly up, and when people's savings could go belly up if the dollar crashes or the euro crashes. And I think that's true, because I don't know that they'll go belly up, but what will probably happen is the government will keep printing money, and give you your $1,000 check or $1,500 check, let's say from Social Security. Right now the purchasing power is not bad, but 10 to 20 years of purchasing power could be 50, 75% less. So you have to figure out other ways to supplement that if you're counting on like Social Security. Now me, I have a pension. I don't talk about it too much, but they used to have those old, I forget what they're called, but they're old style pensions where you get a guaranteed amount. And the union sent me a letter every once in a blue moon, how saying it's well funded, and then they say it's not so well funded, and then the last letter I got, they said we're in trouble. They said we're going to have to cut not the dollar amount, but other benefits like with that pension would come medical benefits. They might have to cut that. I always assume they'll cut that because once you're 65, you get on, in the United States, they put you on the government health care, which I forget what they call that, but that's what they do here, or in the States, I mean. So they're saying the dollar amount is more or less guaranteed, but I'm fairly skeptical because every time I hear from them, which is not very often, but they still actually send a hard copy letter saying that the pension is less and less funded, and to make that up, maybe they're going to ask for contributions from pensioners, or maybe they're going to just cut the pension 80% or 20%. All these things, or maybe they'll say certain people with lesser seniority like me get cut out completely. I don't know how that'll work, but as we've seen lately, the rule of law don't mean much anymore in the States. Anyways, just some ramblings on what I think is about to unfold. I just, for the first time in my life, feel like we're at a stage where things could get really interesting. Like I said in previous videos, I know some of you guys have a little different view. That's cool, but I've never seen it where in the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, people are just rolling over. They're just doing whatever the government says. Meanwhile, they're spending their savings down. They're getting all the equity out of their homes. They're spending all that down. They're letting their businesses go to hell. I mean, it's no fault of theirs because the government, depending on what state you're in, you can't legally even do business. But basically the government's bankrupting certain sectors of the economy and then handing out handouts to other sectors who many times don't even need it or even ask for it. But nevertheless, an acquaintance of mine, he recently got those PPP loans or whatever they're called. At first he didn't apply for it because they didn't want the strings attached. But then as his lawyers and accountant went over it, they can see now how they can work it and live with whatever issues that might become of it. Mainly he and other people even like me feel like, well, the end is nigh, and if you can get something because the government seems to be hell-bent on ripping off the last of the, I hate to call them the remnant, but the last of people with capital. So, and I don't have any good answers where you can go. That's basically what Doug and Matt came up with. There's no perfect place anymore in the world. It used to be other places weren't correlated with the economy of the United States and Europe, and they weren't correlated with all the rules and regulations, but now most countries around the world, especially in the Western world, they're all regulated pretty high, they're all taxed pretty high. Their economy, from the EU to the United States to Australia, Canada, their growth rates are declining more and more every decade. The amount of tax they're extracting goes up a little bit every decade. We're getting closer and closer to the point where I don't know that it'll crash. I just think it'll just keep declining. I basically think the United States is going to go the way of Europe. Every 10 years you're going to get less and less economic growth, and then at some point the growth will be so minimal that there's no way they can fund these pension obligations and these other social obligations they have. They won't even be able to bring in immigrants to fund these things. And at that point they'll have to cut. I don't know what it'll be, but I presume the last thing they'll cut will be people's pensions, but I think it eventually will come to that. So for people who want to bug out, get a head start before everyone else, my only answer is, if you can, try to get a residency in Latin America. To me, it seems a little bit more stable than Asia, and you're more welcome than, say, compared to Asia. If you have your heart set on Asia, go ahead, go there. My take is it's hard to fit in there long term. You're not exactly accepted in society there. At least in Latin America, things are a lot more mellow, and you can more or less do what you want. And just because of the way they think, because there's a certain amount of mercantilism in Latin America, things aren't as competitive as Asia. So for that reason, you can start businesses and take advantage of that. Not that I'm for mercantilism, but there's just certain things. If you like, say you don't have a lot of capital, if you just have a Western upbringing and a Western way of looking at the world, it's like knowledge capital in your brain that you'll have an advantage over a lot of people. It's still to this day I can't figure out why Latins do some of the things they do that, you know, people from other countries don't do, and it seems to benefit us. Like lately I've just seen all these Asians, not a lot, but flooding in, and now I can actually buy a lot of different kind of Japanese beers, which I have never noticed before. And this is in Shaila, this is not even the capital. So now you can buy all these kind of junk foods of both Korea and Japan, and now more and more variety of Japanese beers. So whoever's doing that, the guy, I actually met the guy, I'm pretty sure that's his other business. They're right next to each other, but he's figured out a way to import all these products, so, and there must be a market because he's been doing it a while, so I'll have to see what happens. But I have noticed more Asians moving in. I haven't seen the Syrians because ever since they changed their immigration policy, I haven't seen as many Syrians, but who knows? I don't really live in the capital, so I don't know. Anyway, me, Johnny. Like, share, leave a comment. Even comment on where you want to bug out when the shit hits the fan. You want to stay in North America or Canada, or you want to go to Mexico or Guatemala, or there's a lot of good shit going on in Mexico too. I mean, but like I agree with Johnny Mueller. It depends what region you're in. Actually, some of the people I know are in kind of the safe region that he likes to talk about. Kind of an area I've never been to, so I can't comment too much. But I'm looking forward to going there and kind of seeing it. Anyways, I'm just going to upload this and wait for comments. Thanks.